And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event that has been sponsored and produced by FRAC and the Renewal Chapter. My name is Berthold Leonidas, and I will be serving as the master of ceremony. I will be the one guiding the meeting today. I have with me my event moderator, Brother Kenneth, Wepler. Brother Wepler, would you mind introducing yourself for the recording, please?
Hello, I'm Kenneth Wepler. Currently, I'm the DD for the Alpha Omicron chapter at Ohio University, and I'm also currently the HR manager at Washington State Community College in Marietta, Ohio. I normally always specify the area with the name of it. Been working in higher education for nearly 15 years now. Actually, didn't realize how long it was. Things have changed dramatically in the past 10 years and even more in the past year. But hopefully, if you have questions, please feel free to ask, and hopefully you learn a lot tonight.
Thank you very much, Brother Wepler. And now I will introduce our panelists, and then they will present more information about themselves the same way Kenneth Wepler did before. We have tonight 6 panelists that have joined us. We have Brother Catherine Pogerski. I hope I pronounced that right. We have panelist Leroy Wright, panelist Megan Hegarty, panelist Jennifer Mays, panelist Molly Ray, and panelist Dr. Kevin Wright. Have to respect the PhD. Let us start with the doctor. Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Dr. Kevin Wright. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Student Diversity in the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And I am an alum of the Zeta Omega chapter of DSP from Northern Arizona University.
And how long have you been working in higher education?
Yes, I have been working in higher education since 2014, so going on 7 years.
Awesome to hear. Now let us move on to our second panelist. Brother Molly Ray, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, hi, I am Molly Ray. I'm an alumni from the Kappa Upsilon chapter at Winona State University in Winona, Minnesota. I currently am an HR business partner at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Intercollegiate Athletics. I have been working in higher education for about 3.5 years now. And then I am also within the fraternity. I am a district director at a chapter.
And let us now move to Brother Jennifer Mays.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mays. I am an alumna from the Beta Epsilon chapter at the University of Oklahoma. My current role is the Director of Learning Production within the Office for Academic Innovation at Texas A&M University. I have been working in higher ed since 2008, so 13 years. And I'm a Golden Council member within the fraternity.
I am not worthy. I am not worthy. Let us move on to now Brother Megan Hegarty.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Hegarty. I currently serve as the chapter advisor for the Alpha Epsilon chapter at the University of Minnesota, which is also where I work. I work actually for a nonprofit that is housed at the University of Minnesota.
I didn't get that.
So my role is a little different. Sorry, my Apple Watch just started talking to me. And I was initiated at the Ada Row chapter at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. And I have been working in higher ed since 2003, so about 15 years. Sorry, it was 2005 I graduated with my master's, so.
Does that mean that you've held jobs as a higher ed while doing your master's?
I did work in, I had a grad assistantship at the university where I went for my grad program. And then I've been in higher ed my entire career, so.
Got it, got it. Just making sure.
Yep.
Let us now move to panelist Leroy Wright.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leroy Wright, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I currently work at Albion College here in Albion, Michigan, where I serve as the Vice President of Student Development and Dean of Students. I've been in higher education for 26 years in a variety of roles, from Dean of Students at a school for 14 years to working as Associate Vice Chancellor at a school in North Carolina, was also interim Vice Chancellor at a school in North Carolina. My graduate studies were at Northern Arizona University, where Dr. Wright attended as well too. And so just a lot of years. My first job was a residence director, and I worked full time all of my time in higher education. So I have a variety of things in my portfolio here at Albion College. And I am a member of Delta Rho's chapter at Ferris State University. And I was one of the last chapters that became co-ed in Delta Sigma Pi as well.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Brother Catherine Pogerski.
Hello, I am Catherine Pogerski. I use the she, her pronouns. I was initiated at the Xi chapter at Bryant University in Smithfield, Rhode Island. And then I have been in higher education for 8 years. So I served 6 of those years in a student affairs capacity at Babson College, team student affairs. And then I switched to academic affairs at Northeastern University, which is where I am currently. So for the next 7 days, I am an academic advisor at Northeastern. And then on day 8, I will be an assistant cooperative education faculty member at Northeastern in the business school. So I am in between 2 jobs, kind of. And I don't know what else I was supposed to say, but that's me. So thank you.
And how long have you worked in higher ed?
8 years.
8 years. Awesome. And to round up the introduction, as I said before, my name is Berthold Leonidas. I am the Master of Ceremony today. I am a brother from the Zeta Phi chapter at Florida Atlantic University, and I became a brother in the fall of 2016. I've held personally a graduate assistantship for about a year until COVID caused me to be furloughed, and I held it while doing my master's program. I will graduate this semester, and I am still on the roll. I still receive all the email. I'm still up to date with everything going on with the school. And that is the little bit of contribution that I can say about my brief career in higher eds. Let us now begin with this panel discussion. The first questions that comes to mind, since it is about higher education and us being little SIGs, how many of you happen to have a chapter at your place of work? Feel free to raise your hand. That's 3. All right. Since Brother Hegarty raised her hand first, that is a question for you. How has the interaction between brothers and you as a higher education faculty, how has that relationship developed over the years?
Well, when I guess going back, every university I've worked at, I have ended up as the district director at the universities where I've been working. I've been the district director at several universities. I never was the chapter advisor because they always had a faculty member that would serve in that role. When I started working at the University of Minnesota, I was their district director. And then with the changing of the RVP, I was no longer asked to serve in that role. And because I had worked with the chapter as their DD, they actually reached out and asked me, because I was eligible to serve as their chapter advisor, if I was willing to do that. So I kind of flipped from the district director role into that chapter advisor role. So I've known this chapter, I've been at the university for 8 years, and I've worked with them in some capacity for that entire time. So, and actually I was actually just sharing with the chapter earlier tonight, my position was eliminated due to financial reasons. And so I'm actually in the middle of a job search right now. So I'm trying to help the chapter find a new chapter advisor at the moment, because it looks like I will be leaving the university in the next month or 2. So I've been working with them to try to help them figure out who could step in next in that role. And right now doing a lot of work with the senior vice president on how to better engage faculty with the chapter so that when they find themselves in a position where they need a new chapter advisor, they have a good relationship with some of the folks that they could, lean on to ask to serve in that role. So luckily they have a great district director. It's Chris Anderson, who is also on this call right now. So they'll be in good hands when I leave.
Well, it's good to see that the torch is being passed properly. Jennifer Mays, welcome back. I saw you had a little bit of connection problem. I just mentioned that since we are brothers in higher education, has any one of us here happen to have a chapter at their place of work? I don't know if that is the case for you. Right. And I just mentioned how has the relationship evolved between the chapters and you, basically, as you held the role in higher education. Since you just joined us, I'm going to have Brother Leroy Wright, who rose his hand, if he wants to add on to what Brother Hegarty stated.
My interaction has been limited. I think when the students here at Albion College, the chapter here, heard that I was coming, apparently they did their research. And so they were all asking me questions on the day of my campus visit. And so I got a warm welcome from the chapter there because of my history with Delta Sigma Pi. And that I oftentimes get a visit from the president periodically just to pick my brain on different things. So I leave myself open to that organization and I try not to be biased to all the organizations, but I'm a little biased to Delta Sigma Pi. So other than that, the chapter here connects with me when they need me.
It's good to see that we are able to have multiple versions of how chapters react to members in higher education. Someone raised their hand earlier. I'm not sure if it was to ask a question or if it was to make a comment. Nobody? Well, never mind then.
It was Dr. Wright.
Dr. Wright. Yes, you had a comment or a question?
No, I was just applauding what was already said in the space. I don't have any questions at the moment.
All right then, thank you. And let us move on to other question, unless someone would like to jump in to the previously stated question. Anyone? All right, let us move on to the next question. The guests in the room, if you have any question, feel free to use the raise hand option on Zoom so that you can also participate and ask any question that you would like to know. Right. So the second question that really comes to mind is, Delta Sigma Pi, most of the students, most of the brothers, the collegiate brothers, will focus on the brotherhood aspect. How much of the academic, shall we say, requirement or standard of Delta Sigma Pi, of the chapters that you interact with, how much of that do you notice? Do you notice that they are very active when it comes to trying to keep the academic reputation of the brothers? Are they not so much focused about it? How do brothers balance their fraternity life and their academic ambition, if that is observable? Brother Catherine Pogerski, you have a look in your eye?
I have a face I can't fix fast enough. It made me a really interesting hearing officer. Not necessarily the best poker face, and a fun on-call person. So trying to answer your question. So I'm not super involved with the chapters in my area, if I'm being fully transparent. I often had a role as a disciplinarian in student affairs, and I was a live-on staff member. So I felt trying to keep a professional boundary while managing what I would have wanted as support from a person at the institution when I was in the fraternity was something that was hard for me to try and figure out, and I'm still figuring out in my professional career. How do I best support a chapter where I work and maintain the integrity I have and the responsibility I have to my entire student population? So I think to answer your question, which you may have to remind me of, about the academic rigor.
How do brothers balance their academic vigor versus their fraternity obligations or fraternity life?
Yeah, I mean, as an advisor, I see this a lot with students generally, so I'll answer it from a kind of broad standpoint, if that's all right.
Mhm.
I think it's hard, right? Especially if you're a part of the leadership team within a chapter. I think it can feel really, as a collegiate, it can feel really overwhelming. I served as president of my chapter. I held multiple leadership roles, and I constantly was trying to find the balance of I have a rigorous course load
Mhm.
as a business student, and I'm maybe not doing well in all of my classes, which was the case for me. And how do I navigate that when I
Mhm.
also don't want to let an entire chapter down? You know, when I know the leadership in the area and I feel a responsibility to maintain our integrity as a chapter.
Mhm.
And it's challenging. You know, I think that's where all of us who are professionals on this panel would say that's when we want you to come see us, is when you're
Mhm.
struggling, preferably proactively rather than reactively.
Mhm.
But I'm employed because of reactivity, not proactivity often. Um, so I would say, come see us, you know,
Right.
that's why we're here. We want you to come meet with us. We want you to come talk to us. And most of us have been in a position where we've struggled in our own way to get to where we are. So we're not here to judge you. We're just here to help. And
Mhm.
that's why we do the work that we do. So I think that kind of answers your question.
It does.
But that is my roundabout way of answering it. So thank
Yeah. Anyone would like to add on to that? Right. So now that the more pressing question about blending fraternity and work has been answered, let us move on to more work-specific questions. For example, what made you interested in basically working or continuing to work in higher education? What keeps you in that industry? Let us have brother Jennifer Mays start us off.
Sure. And let's hope that my internet connection's a little bit better as I get through this.
Mhm.
So I will say I initially got interested in working in higher ed because when I was job hunting, the University of Oklahoma reached out and was like, "Hey, do you need a job?" And I needed a job. So I definitely was like, I'm now in higher ed. The reason why I stayed in higher ed, though, is because I like being in this industry because it has an impact on developing others. I mean, and in multiple ways too. So, like, for example, in my current role with learning production, we are basically responsible for getting courses online and hybrid, which clearly is key right about now. And so that's an opportunity for me to give back in the development of students. In a previous role that I held at the University of Oklahoma, it was specifically in regards to helping develop faculty and making sure that there were courses available for the students to actually take. So I've stayed in because I like the idea of, you know, lifelong learning and being able to develop one another. And I think higher ed is one of the best industries to do that in.
Does anybody else would like to add on to that answer as to why they? Oh, brother, right? Yes, would you like to answer?
I mean, it's a fun profession. It's an exciting environment to work in. You know, I caught the bug early on. My background is in human resource management, and it's an easy transferable experience because we deal a lot with training and development. You do performance reviews. You develop your team. You talk about morale within your team, and so it's easy for me to navigate that transition. For one, I caught the bug when I was a resident advisor on campus. And so that had a lot to do with it. And so I stay in the profession because I get to contribute to, you know, helping our students find their purpose, helping students, you know, figure out, you know, who they're becoming. I always tell students that the day that you start as a first year student, you should be an entirely different person by the time you graduate with your degree. And so that I call that the transformational experience that our students should be taking advantage of, from getting involved, from figuring out their leadership capacities to, you know, there's going to be some struggles, there's going to be some failures that may happen in their lives. They're going to have relationships, so they're going to grow, they're going to develop. And so at the end of the day, you know, when you're able to challenge and support students, that's Sanford, if any of you are interested in higher ed theory, there's an opportunity for you. Too much challenge is bad and too much support is bad. And so in this profession, we get to provide that support to students. And so I've stayed in the profession because I get to see lives change, and I get to see professionals grow and develop on their journeys as well too. So, and they get to act on that purpose and that passion that they have that through their experiences of internships or graduating as well. And at the end of the day, it keeps me young. You know, I'll be 50 years old, February 25th. And so that's exciting, and my energy is always gone. So if you're looking for a profession that's going to help you grow, understand yourself and all the intersections of your own life, this is a place to work. And there's so many different opportunities that you all can thrive in, which is why I continued up the administrative ladder of higher education.
That was a very, very insightful answer. Molly, do you think you can follow up with that by answering this following question, if possible? What do you enjoy about working in higher education, particularly for you in student athletics?
So the one thing I really enjoy about it is I see the behind the scenes of the college sports field. I see how we get the games to run. I see how we're helping the student athletes because we're hiring the tutors. Being in HR, we're hiring the tutors that help them. We have the psychologists on staff, and it's like I get to see the behind the scenes, but I also get to see these student athletes grow, and seeing them grow is amazing because you can then follow them in their career path wherever they go afterwards. We have a program with a career in leadership where we are making sure that all of our student athletes, that if they don't go professional, that they are going out and they're getting jobs. We have career fairs specifically for them, and we're talking to them all the time and just making sure like they're being successful. It's great to see that, to see these students thrive within the network, because sometimes they start to fall behind a little bit being in sports, but we're there to help make sure they can achieve all of their goals.
Dr. Wright, would you like to add on to that?
Yes, sure. One of the things that I do enjoy most about working in higher ed is the connections that you make that extend even beyond when a student graduates and departs from the institution. Just recently, I had a student hit me up on LinkedIn, and they were just like, "Oh, Mr. Wright, you know, I was in your class, or I went to your program all these years ago, and I just wanted to say that, like, I still remember when you said this or taught this to me, and just know that, like, it really helped out, and now I'm doing these things, and now I have this job, and now I'm married," and it's just like, wow, you know, and I really appreciate knowing that I can be one of the small pieces of the larger puzzle of another person's life in order for them to, you know, seek out their aspirations and, you know, live up to their expectations and accomplishing so many things. And it's a very humbling experience because of the fact that I try myself to not forget where I came from, but just knowing that and knowing that so many people contributed to my success, it feels great knowing that I can do that for someone else and making sure that they can get to where they want to be. That extends beyond what they ever imagined when they first step foot onto campus as a first-year student.
Brother Hegarty, I saw that you were nodding in approval. So what advice do you have for someone who wants to make a career in higher education and experience all that whirlwind of emotion and pride?
Ooh, don't do it for the money. It is certainly not the most lucrative, but I do agree with everything that Dr. Wright and Molly and Leroy have said, that it is a very rewarding career, just not financially all the time. But I think probably for someone who wants to kind of get into the field, I would say a lot of the jobs out there right now, especially, require a master's degree. And so getting, figuring out if it's something that you want to dedicate another potentially 2 years of education to. I also always tell people that are going to get their master's degree in higher education, don't pay for it. There are universities out there where you can have an assistantship, as I did, and then you're working for the university and you get tuition remission, and so you are actually paid and don't have to pay tuition. So don't spend money on the master's degree if you can avoid it. And then I think, someone put something in the chat about higher ed theory. If you're really interested in it, start taking a look at some of the student development theories that are out there. If that's stuff that you're not interested in spending 2 years of your life learning about, then, this probably isn't the right direction for you to be heading. We also do a lot of work in higher ed around social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so if those are not things that you're super passionate about, again, that may not be the right fit for you. The other thing I, suggest to folks is looking into some of the professional associations that are out there for folks that work in higher education. There's, feels like there's one for every office on campus. Like there's a separate one for Molly who's working in athletics than there is for me who used to be an academic advisor. And then there's some like NASPA or ACPA that are kind of more for general, everybody who works in higher ed might be, at those associations. But that's one way to start to sort of network with the folks that you might need to connect with if you're looking at getting into the field, is spending some time, maybe, visiting those associations, especially this year. Places like NASPA and ACPA are having their annual conferences virtually, and they're super inexpensive. So, that would be one way to kind of start building your network in the field, is to potentially attend those virtual conferences and start to learn about what it is that the field is all about. I was on another panel with Dr. Wright the other day, and he made the comment that I wrote down that it's hard work, but it's heart work. And I really love that comment because, as he just put in the chat there, it's not an easy profession. It's going to take a lot out of you to do it, but it is very rewarding. And as an academic advisor, when I used to get to stand at the base of the stage as students were coming down from graduation, and I was helping direct them back to their seats. But the number of times that someone stopped to give me a hug because I had been a part of, their journey in getting to that place, that's an awesome feeling that you can't get from a lot of other professions. So.
I was going to add that higher education is a business as well too. So there's all kinds of functions as business professionals, or someone who typically may be coming from a background in HR or IT, or you work in the food services industry, you work in housekeeping, and whatever the field may be. Those jobs exist at a college or university. I mean, there are associations I participate in that it's just not NASPA or ACPA. There's a National Association of College and University Business Officers, where you have HR professionals that participate in there. You talk about budgeting and finance, and there's accountants. There's there's all kinds of folks who navigate through those experiences, which is why I mentioned earlier in the conversation that higher ed, there's a lot of transferable skills from working in industry or corporate America or hospital industry or hospitality industry that are easy to navigate other employment experiences within a college or university. So don't think that you're just going to be working with students. Our service is for students. At the end of the day, we all have jobs because of students, but the university has to function and operate just like any other organization or business. And when enrollment's done, then when enrollment's low, then there's going to be an issue about finance and budgeting. And then you may have to furlough or let people off or let people go because of financial issues. So, I mean, it may not be a profit center to be earning profit at the end of the day because we're teaching and transforming lives, but you still have those processes that any business would have to navigate. So don't think in terms of just working in student development. There's business affairs, there's institutional advancement that does fundraising and donor development. There's IT departments on campus, from software development and managing web development and all of these other things that exist within that. So I just wanted to add that to the mix of, our heart is where our heart is in higher ed.
Mhm.
Like you confront versus confront some things in higher ed as well, but that depends on your work and it depends on your office. Some offices don't even interface with students every day. And so that's another part to that equation as well.
Mm. And given the sheer complexity and sheer diversity of positions and interactions within a university and higher education, and how it is also a business, this whole entire environment might lead to you having to endure a couple of difficulties from your career. Brother Pogerski, what do you think are some of those difficulties, some you've heard of or come across that you think are pretty specific to higher education?
Yeah, getting hit with tough questions. I'm ready. So ready.
Huda.
Yeah, bring it on. So I would say, I mean, personally, I'll share a bit about my experience because it's what I'm an expert in. I am married to a higher ed professional, so my husband is in academic advising. And there was a long conversation around, are we location bound or not in our job hunts? We both graduated at the same time. I graduated with a higher GPA. Don't ever let anyone forget it. But I have also felt like I've been following my husband's career. He advanced a bit quicker than I did. And when you're both professionals in the same environment, how do you navigate that conversation? How do you decide who gets the next turn? Whose job hunt is the focus? How do we build on our careers? Can I work at the same institution as you? Is the institution large enough that we won't interface with each other? In Northeastern's case, it is. We're both employees of Northeastern. We don't see each other. He works in one college, I work in another, and we pretend like we don't exist from 8 to 5. That's not really true because we sit in our living room with our dog every day working at home, but that is what it is. So from that standpoint, I don't think that's any different than any other field. And there are some nuances to when you both work in institutions. I also think for me, when I was job hunting early in my career, the ethics of the institution that I was going to work for was something that was important. So, I was a live-on professional. I was allowed to have my then partner live with me. And he just had to pass a background check. Was that true for everyone who maybe was in a relationship that looked different from mine? If that was the case, then I'd be happy to work there. If that was not the case, then I didn't feel like I could work in that environment. And so there are, again, some nuances that made me say, is this an institution I'm comfortable supporting the growth and development of the future leaders of whatever industry we're in? Do I feel equipped to do that? And do I feel that our focus on their development as individuals, my master's is in student development and counseling, so it was a big focus of mine. Do I feel that I can stand behind our mission and say that I support this institution, I believe in it, and this institution, every institution I've been at has become a part of me. I take pride in the institutions I have worked at. I take pride in those students and being a part of their journey. So all of that was really important and nuanced and some challenges. And, I think it was humbling. Sorry, I'm rambling, but I think it was humbling when I had always thought that I would have a big fancy title and be, a dean of students or a vice president of student affairs. Yeah, looking over at you, Leroy. And I have decided that maybe that's not for me. I really thought about that one. I got it. But I also realized that there's a big bottleneck in higher education, particularly in student affairs. And I'm location bound. I am Massachusetts born and raised, which is good and bad, depending on how you're looking at that. But I didn't want to leave. And the institutions are limited here, and there's not a lot of upward mobility. And so that gets challenging of, do I, move across? Do I move up? Do I go diagonal? I'm now officially a faculty member, and I've never liked faculty in my entire career. They've been a thorn in my side that won't leave, and now I have to be a faculty member. This is wild to me. So long-winded answer of saying those are some of the challenges I've come across.
If this particular segment of the recording would broadcast it everywhere, teachers all around the world would all applaud because this really showcases what teachers really go through. Does anybody feel courageous enough to add on to that? Or should I move on to something else?
Well, I'll
Sure.
say, should go, Jennifer.
Well, Jennifer
Oh,
can go first.
I was just going to say there is a ton of bureaucracy in higher ed. It takes forever to push any type of new initiative through. And because I've worked on the course sides of things, any new course or new degree program, new anything that you want to try starting, it's got to go through about 5 committees at the university first. And then it has to go like to your board of state regents. If you're a public institution, it might need to pass through the accrediting body that the institution reports to. I mean, it is just insane how long it takes. I think it almost took us 1.5 years to launch a new degree program just for approvals alone, because committees don't meet regularly, and it's just really hard to get anything done in a really timely manner when working in higher ed, which is unfortunate because higher ed needs to be an industry that is constantly adapting to what's going on in the world so that the students are prepared to go out into the world and be productive and successful citizens. Unfortunately, we move so slow that I don't even know how that's truly possible a lot of the times, but we do our best. So yeah, I would say lots and lots and lots of red tape, lots of slow moving initiatives, unfortunately.
I
Molly,
will
you want to
say
make
too,
it
though,
3 out of
Jennifer,
3?
a couple people have put it in the chat that depends on where you're working. So having been at a large state school, I 1000% agree with you. I also worked at a small private liberal arts college where they literally handed me a credit card and they were like, spend what you need to spend, you know, just don't go over budget, do your thing. So it depends on where you're working.
Molly, would you like to add on your comment?
Yeah, I'll say, because I am at a larger state school also, like, because most of our transactions in HR have to go through the central campus's HR before we can even do anything. So that's a difficulty because sometimes some people in athletics, they want things done right away, done how they want it. And there's rules and regulations that we have to follow. And another thing with a difficulty is people coming into work in athletics specifically, they think we have all the money in the world to pay these employees. There's certain jobs within athletics that get some money, but we also have to follow the university's regulations for pay. So if you're in a certain job class, we have to follow the pay restrictions, and we can't just go above and beyond that without getting prior approvals. So it's like just knowing people, like Megan said, you're not in it for the money really, because you have to follow certain regulations and you may not be paid the best. And another thing with college athletics is people think, oh, I'm going to be working with the coaches. Most of the time, you're not working with those coaches. You're working with the senior staff member possibly, or people under that to get to those coaches. So sometimes we look for people that aren't fans for the sports, because if they're fans, it gets too much in their head and they just care about that, like wanting to help that specific sport out.
That is indeed an interesting difficulty that happens, and it's funny to see that how every aspect of higher education, each job has their own difficulties based on how they interact with the student or university as a whole. Brief little parentheses, but Brother Whippler, do we have any question to any panelists about higher education right now? None so far. All right,
No, I don't
let
see
us move
anything.
on to nothing. All right, let us move on to something a bit closer to home, which is the Sigma Pi, royal purple and old gold. One thing that I've always strived for when I was a collegiate is to have help, to ask our faculties help when it comes to professional activities, events, and fundraisers and other such as things, because of the fact that universities, they do have certain resources that can help out a chapter. And therefore, what are some tools that the chapters can ask their faculties to help them fulfill, the professional activity event or the fundraisers or anything specific to that? Let us start with eeny, meeny, miny, Brother Megan Hegarty.
Are you asking for like advice we would give to chapters who are wanting to work more with their faculty, or?
Yes, the advice that you would provide when it comes to how to use university resources to go toward chapter goals, like professional activities and so on and so forth.
Well, one of the things that has been the case at just about every campus I've worked at is that the student senate or student association on campus typically has funding that they'll provide to different student organizations, especially, they can basically apply for grants from the student senate or the student association. And so that's one thing that I've made sure all of the chapters I work with are aware of, that they can go to their student senate to request grants. And typically it has to be for like a specific event or something like that. But turns out that like lead school and provincial conferences typically fall within the categories of what those grants can fund. So I think that's kind of always been one of the things I see as my role as the chapter advisor, or just, even when I was the district director, of being someone that works in higher ed and knows those processes, to make sure that students are aware that they can, go request that funding and use it to help them travel to some of our national events. So that is definitely one piece of advice that I would give to chapters, to make sure that they're taking advantage of those opportunities, whatever they are on their campus.
Brother Pogerski, is that a difficult question to ask again, or are you more comfortable just going for it this time? I don't want to overwhelm.
I'm happy to answer, but I would like to divert to my colleague who had their hand up.
Feel free. Yes.
Leroy, you are welcome to respond.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. I was just going to add to the conversation that there are so many different funding sources on a college or university campus as it relates to supporting student organizations, specifically Delta Sigma Pi. Most of our chapters are tied to the business school or the College of Business or professional school. So the dean of that particular school or college has that resource or that support as a professional fraternity. You have Megan mentioned the student fee allocation processes. Students pay student fees, and student organizations don't always rush to go and request those grants or that funding support. And it becomes the have and the have-nots if they're not actually participating in those processes, and they lose out on those funding sources. Every college and university has a campus activities office where there are opportunities for them to meet with their campus activities staff or event planning, for collaborating with other organizations on programming. Delta Sigma Pi talks about professional interviewing, or they talk about, various things, resume development, working with their career services offices, as well as another important partnership. So there's a lot of different funding sources on every campus that Delta Sigma Pi chapters can utilize. And that the advisors are important because they need to be able to help navigate those processes or direct them to where those funding sources or those support areas are on their campuses.
That is a lot of information. But since it is recorded, chapters will definitely have access to it. Anybody else have any alternative or not yet discussed resources that chapters can use?
Yeah, I would say to also just ask us, like, the day I get an email in my inbox from a student who's just like, hi, I would like to meet with you to discuss your time in Delta Sigma Pi. I'm like, yes, I would love to, a break from my day. Not that I don't love my job, I'm very happy in my role. And it's pretty cool to be able to just sit down and talk, like I used to always say, like talk shop with someone and hear about the events that they're doing. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out. The worst thing that's going to happen is we're going to say like, hey, I can't meet this week, but I'll meet next week. And I have a business degree. I studied finance. I have a whole network of my friends who are now hiring professionals, who are coming right out of undergrad. So I think sometimes our networks, even though we're administrators, are sometimes overlooked for that reason, because it's like, oh, you work at a college, what could you offer me? And I'm like, well, would you like to work at one of the big 4 accounting firms? Because I have a dozen people I could call to get you an informational interview there. So definitely talk to us, have us help you network, have us help you process issues. And sometimes we can pull back some of that bureaucratic tape, if you will, to say, this is why this is happening at your institution. Maybe this is the roadblock you are facing. Let's talk about ways to navigate that. Because those of us that work in this field, we know it. We know what a roadblock could be. We can anticipate that, and we can help you figure out the appropriate way to navigate it before it's an issue. So I'm, again, big fan of proactivity over here. So I would say just talk to us.
So if they need anything, all they need to do is ask. Great. Brother Wepler, any questions or from the Q&A
Yeah, I
session?
got a question. And this can be to anyone that wants to answer. Have any of you looked outside of the field of higher education, and what would you recommend when you come into higher education?
So I started my field, I started off working at a hospital or a clinic, and then I moved to a benefits administrator, and then I moved to higher education. So I started off not in higher education, and just knowing the rules and regulations within higher education are a lot different than private sector. Sometimes like there's some jobs and there's different job classifications and everything, and just knowing there's different rules that you're going to have to follow. There's different rules that your employer is going to have to follow also. Just knowing like it is completely different from the private for rules and regulations that they have to follow.
So my experience, I've worked in government affairs, I've worked in construction, and I even used to be a bodyguard, right? Before I got into higher ed. And something that I will say was a major culture shock was the level of empathy that was implicitly and explicitly required of me to work in this role. And I would say that that's mainly because of the specific function area that I work in, because I previously have worked in residence life, TRIO programs, grant funded programs, identity-based centers, multicultural affairs, et cetera, because I do want to make it very clear, like many of the other panelists have said, that not every position within higher education is centering around students or student development. There are some people that work in higher education that don't care about students at all. They care about a paycheck, quite frankly. So at least with my functional area, like we are student-centered 100%. And it was very interesting to learn, okay, yeah, I know that you're a human being, cool. I know that you have feelings. What am I supposed to do with that? Oh, I'm supposed to like process that with you? Okay, cool. All right, this feels weird, but okay, we're getting somewhere. We're developing, we're growing, we're maturing, we're vibing. And at the same time, why are there so many of them? You know what I mean? So it was like very hard for me to be mindful of like, you cannot work in higher ed and be a cookie cutter practitioner. You cannot be a cookie cutter scholar practitioner. You can't be a cookie cutter champion or advocate. And something that I tell people is that it's all about providing that customized experience for folks, because you're working, specifically if you work in a function area that's similar to mine, you're working with so many different student demographics, student backgrounds, student populations, that everyone's needs vary and differ from institution to institution or college to college. So therefore, that empathy, even more so that sense of cultural competency, even more so that sense of being trauma informed, can be very beneficial to your work if you are trying to work specifically in student affairs or any other function area within higher education that specifically centers around the development and the retention of students at the institution.
That is a very good point that you did raise, because I've had to go through a lot of different training when it comes to certain crime prevention or certain other activities. There's a multitude of them. I forget the technical terms, but you all, of course, understand where I'm going with this. And there is that individual empathy required per person, given all their cases. That takes a lot of us, and we are able to do so because higher education is a field that we're all competent at. We have a question from Tyrone Newsom. Yes, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. More so of a comment to make, and or wanted to say something, especially to what Dr. Wright just said. Also, too, I just wanted to naturally just say thank you all for the work that you do in higher education, because it is recognized as an amazing. You don't realize the impact that you have on students, faculty, staff with your interactions. And I've worked in higher education for over 22 years, and it was not my focus. I did not want to go down this path. I was an econ manager and I knew what I wanted to do, but opportunity presented itself and I've never looked back. It is about making it what you want it to be. I applaud you all too on this focus, especially finding out over the years how many brothers are in higher education and learning. I'm gonna pick on Catherine just a little bit right now. Remembering talking to her about her deciding whether or not she wanted to go into student affairs, and seeing her evolution has been great. And that's been one of the things I truly appreciate seeing. But I also wanted to comment too on you all is also to whether you've been in 3 years or you've been in 13 or 20 plus years, how you all have navigated the culture and climate of an institution, because it takes a specific kind of individual, especially as we're dealing with a lot of climate change at various colleges and universities. So I applaud you to that aspect. But I appreciate what you have stated, but also to the comment on what Dr. Wright just says. I think within higher education, whatever role we play, it's not only being trauma informed, but also learning how to be trauma responsive to those needs and addressing those different things. So, and I think we all do it in different ways. But it's one thing I've kept mindful that's kept me positive and kind of motivated in working in this field. So, but I just wanted to say that, and thank you all for what you do.
Thank you very much for your kind word, Terrence. Kenneth, do we have any other questions from the Q&A?
Yes, I actually have a few. So one of them that I think is kind of interesting is what is something that you know now that you wish you would have learned earlier in your academic career?
So for me, I knew that I wanted to work in higher education as early as the second semester of my first year of undergrad. So that was the spring of 2011. And then I got involved with this initiative called the National Undergraduate Fellows Program, which is under a professional association, which is for undergraduate students from historically marginalized backgrounds that want to enter the field of student affairs. No shade to my mentors. It's just that many of my mentors said, oh, you're gonna go to grad school. And I was thinking like, why do I gotta go to get more school? Why do I need another expensive piece of paper to do this job? Because still to this day, sometimes I'll do a job or a task of my job and I'm like, did I need a doctorate for this? Did I need a whole master's degree to do this? You know what I mean? I'm just being honest, right? But when it came to going to grad school and even further pursuing a doctorate, something that all my mentors told me is just like, you're gonna go to grad school for higher ed. You're gonna go to grad school for student affairs. When I left and graduated my master's and worked in my first full-time position at the University of Cincinnati, I was surrounded by people with MBAs, MEDs, MSWs, Masters of Social Work, right? Law degrees. I was working for a director who had a terminal degree in like fine arts, so MFA, Masters of Fine Arts. And I was just very surprised by that because I'm thinking, oh, everyone that works in higher ed went to grad school for student affairs or higher ed. So I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy my graduate school experience. It's just that there are some things that I feel like I did miss out on because I was under the impression that, oh, there's only one kind of degree that can get me into this field, when in actuality, higher ed is pretty fluid because of the fact that because at least from my experience, many times when you're job searching, they don't really care what kind of master's you have. They just care that you have a master's, if that makes sense. So I would at least let folks know that like, if you already have a master's degree and you're already thinking like, well, oh, I have an MBA, but that's not a master's in higher ed, I need to now go back to school. Don't limit yourself. Don't discredit your hard work. Don't discredit your MBA because you worked your butt off for that, right? So if you already have an advanced degree, just know that there still are opportunities for you in this work. And it's not just specifically, oh, you have to go get a master's in higher ed. So that's one thing that I didn't learn until it was pretty much too late, because I'm like, well, if I go back to school, I'm not getting another master's. I'm going to get the next thing up, which is what happens. So yeah.
That is interesting. Anybody else would like to add to that?
I would just add that, what I know now after all these years, I started college as a pre-pharmacy. I was going to be a pharmacist, and I did 2 years pharmacy and never applied to pharmacy school because I caught the bug of higher ed. But what I would have done differently then is that I would have took more business courses and I would probably got my MBA as a part of my role in higher education today, because my background is in counseling. And so I ended up in this vice president, dean of students role for the last, 18 years. It's all about business. It's about money. It's about budgeting. It's being, fiduciarily responsible in how we manage our budgets and how we make cuts and how we, find other resources. And writing grants is another thing that, I wish I would have had in my portfolio back in the day, but I'm a fast learner. So over the last 5 or 10 years, I've developed my business acumen because, we have to make decisions that's aligned with the mission of the institution, but we also have to justify the rationale of how we spend money. So having that business acumen is really critical today in higher education. And a lot of folks who are leaving or retiring higher ed had the traditional pathway of working in student development or counseling or social work, or it's the helping profession is what it is. But having that business acumen goes a long way in this profession. So anybody interested in transitioning to higher ed, make sure you bring your business acumen and savviness with you, because you're going to need that as you work up the chain in higher education. It's a dog eat dog world in higher ed too, not just in corporate America.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom on that particular point. Kenneth, any other questions?
I'm going to have one more question and just kind of one follow-up to that one. With Dubsma Pi being a lot about being volunteers, what tips do you have for volunteer leaders in growing and developing the patience with students, especially students of today, because it's a whole new atmosphere? So didn't know if anybody wanted to answer that.
Yeah, I can start with that one. You're working with folks who have underdeveloped brains, yet are some of the most brilliant people you have ever met. And it is a very weird dichotomy to live in. I work with some of the most brilliant students that I mean, some of my students had sold businesses. They were already like worth millions. I owe people hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm worth negative income, and they're worth millions. And then I still would have to walk into a residence hall and tell students why it's inappropriate to smear poop on a wall. And then I am grounded in the sense that these are folks with underdeveloped brains. And so it takes a lot of patience. I am a big old salty New Englander. It's just who I am as a person. And I think it takes a whole lot of salt and a whole lot of resiliency. And it's often not personal. I think there was a, question about what have we learned? And I wish that I had learned to unpack the privilege I carry sooner, especially as a straight white cis woman in a field of higher ed where there's so many of me here. There's so many who look like me that are in this field that want to do the work, that want to save everyone, and you can't. And a lot of times it's displaced feelings. And so really think about what your intentions are, who it is that you're serving, and can you serve everyone? And it's okay if the answer to that is no. Those are my unfiltered thoughts.
I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat, but I'm going to ignore them for now and ask, does anybody else have anything they can add to that? Maybe Brother Mays?
So that's really hard for me because I actually don't work with students. I primarily work with faculty members, but I will say, practice patience. That's for students, that's for faculty, that's for everything. And I think that while I was serving as a volunteer leader, I definitely needed a lot of patience because everybody tries to, sometimes people try to do the bare minimum just to get by. And and they might just try your patience a little bit. So I really think it's one of those things where it's like, hey, they're just going to do what they think they can get away with. And you just have to know and guide them to be like, hey, so I know you think that, but why don't we try this way, and try to be encouraging and point out the reasons why the things that need to get done need to be done in a certain way. But practicing patience is probably my biggest point to hone in on.
Well, it is, I guess, both good and bad to know that some habits built in college will follow you through your life, and therefore be patient and help them out now so that you don't have to deal with it later. Kenneth, I think there was a part two to that question.
It was just kind of a wrapping up type of question, but just if anybody wanted to reach out to any of the panelists, would you mind if they reached out to you, even via LinkedIn?
I think that's
Would
great.
would everyone like to verbally share any form of information, any way that they would like brothers or students to communicate with them? That way it can be on the record. Let us start with the doctor, since, PhD.
So done. So I do want to clarify that I do not have a PhD. I have an EDD, and that's something that I've also learned pretty early on in my career, is that there's different kinds of terminal degrees. So PhD is the most common kind of doctorate, but I have an EDD, which is a doctorate of education. So I just want to acknowledge that and pay respect to those that do have PhDs, but also pay respect to those that have other kinds of terminal degrees, because we all went through so much to get that lovely degree. But yeah, one way that people can reach out to me is via LinkedIn, and I put that in the chat, but also via email. And according to my students, I'm old fashioned. I love talking on the phone. So if anyone is ever down to talk on the phone, please let me know, because I will get very excited, because I feel like things make more sense over the phone. I feel like things get done quicker over the phone. I feel like I can actually understand people more when we're talking either in person or over the phone, because quite frankly, it gets very exhausting if we're continuously just looking at words on a screen, which is more of our reality nowadays than it was pre-COVID. So honestly, just hearing the voice of another person is something that I don't like to take for granted. So those little things, I'm always down to have a chat.
Awesome. Brother Ray, would you like to continue?
Yeah, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if they want to email me, my email at my job is mjr@athletics.wisc.edu. Or like Kevin, I like talking on the phone because it is easier to get your point across over the phone talking than through emailing or text messages. So I am available if anybody has any questions, and if anybody wants to talk about college athletics and working in that field, they can definitely reach out.
Awesome. Let us continue with Mr. Leroy Wright.
I'm accessible by lwright@albion.edu. It's very simple. lwright@albion.edu. And you can also send me an email, and we can talk after you send me an email. I'm a busy guy, but I'm here to help, and I'm here to support.
And we appreciate that. Let us continue with Brother Hegarty.
Yeah, I think most of us have dropped our LinkedIn or our email in the chat for people. So
fair enough. Brother Mays.
Yes, LinkedIn works best for me. I am about to put my personal email address in the chat. So either way is fine.
And finally, Brother Catherine Pogerski.
Yeah, I'm really bad at my personal email, so I'm not even gonna put it in there. Thank you to the organizers of this. We're like, Catherine, are you alive? And I was like, yes, I'm here. You're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me, as I'm about to transition roles. So I will update you all with my contact info post my new job.
And last but not least, since he also has quite a career in higher education, Brother Whippler, would you like to inform us of how we can contact you for any advice or talk about higher education?
Yes, I had put my LinkedIn profile into the chat, so you're more than welcome to connect with me via there. Probably up until about 3 months ago, I was probably on LinkedIn maybe once a month, but now it's more like 2 or 3 times a day. So it's kind of become it's been a better platform to use, let's put it that way, and connecting with a lot more people that way. So always able to reach me out from there. I'm actually in agreement with a lot of other people. I'm a Trekkie, so back in the 90s, I was thinking, hey, it'd be cool to be able to have video chat with everything. But now I've even reverted back to please don't text me. Certain people just give me a call because they actually get back to that human. So it's kind of a nice interaction with being able to get back to calling people. But yeah, more than welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn, then we can go from there.
Awesome. And I will make sure that the host and co-host will save the chat so that they can add so that they can add your email to the information that was already used on the event on Facebook, since your LinkedIn at least were already there for presentation. Now, yes, it is time for the picture for proof of event. So panelists, it is time to smile. And Vito, it's time to take the picture.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Jen's back. Okay. Panelists,
Can you guys
smile.
see me?
We can. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. I personally want to say, since I recruited all the panelists and the moderator and the MC, thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's late for you East Coasters, but myself, Reno, Frack, we all really appreciate it. And once we have the YouTube link up, or however we are going to get this going, we will make sure you get it. And Catherine, I'll be in Massachusetts in like 90 days, so I'll see you soon.
This concludes the meeting proper. Thank you very much for all the panelists. Thank you very much for my event moderator. And thank you for all the guests who have been here for all the question and participation. I now call the meeting adjourned.